Welcome to SikhCast, brought to you by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.
Welcome to this episode of the SikhCast. We'll be exploring a different take to the COVID-19 discussion than what we usually talk about. This time, we'll be looking into how it'll affect the world order. We'll go into detail about shifting entrepreneurship and businesses, how it may change the Sikh community, and staying connected with the physical Sangat. The audio you'll be hearing is from a webinar that we did with some really interesting voices. Hosting the discussion will be Dr. Harsohena Kaur, who's currently based in New Jersey. She grew up in Punjab, India, before coming to the United States, where she completed her pediatric residency at Emory University School of Medicine in Atlanta. Next, we have Dr. Amar Singh. He is currently the CEO of Instilla, a company focused on embolic therapies for hypervascular tumors. He holds a master's and a PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Texas and has been a pioneer in numerous patented medical technologies used in biomaterials and biosurgery. And lastly is Dr. Kuldip Singh. He and his wife founded Women Rise, a society based in British Columbia, Canada, dedicated to reducing drug and gang violence in their community. But it has now since become an organization focused on COVID prevention and feeding the needy. He's a graduate from the Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin, Ireland, and manages a family practice in Abbotsford, BC. These discussions are from live webinars that the Sikh Research Institute hosts. So, if you like what you hear, but had some questions that you wish you could have asked the presenters, head over to our upcoming webinar page at bigmarker.com/SikhRI and register for one of our upcoming discussions. Hope to see you there. Starting us off is Dr. Harsohena Kaur.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you so much for being with us in this webinar, and I'm grateful to my esteemed panelists for being here today. We are in the middle of a singular event in history. While most of us deal with individual problems on a varying basis, it is rare that everybody all across the world is dealing with a single problem at the same time. And so we are in the midst of that, thanks to COVID. And interesting that a tiny little virus has brought all of us to our knees. We are bound together by this impact, and there's been a lot of talk of fear, disease, loss of freedom, loss of movement, loss of control. And I'd like to begin by asking each of you to reflect on how you are dealing with this and the change that COVID has brought into your lives, both sort of professionally and particularly as a Sikh. Dr. Asani, would you like to start?
Sure. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for including me in this webinar. I think the presence of this virus is sort of a global wake-up call, and I think it is a dislocation that is taking place. So instead of our lives being continuous the way momentum was carrying us forward, it's a dislocation. And now we tend to view any disruption initially as being negative because we are happy with how things are, or at least we know what things are. So any change that takes place is uncomfortable. But if you think about it, any activity that we do, initially it is, when we are learning, it's uncomfortable. And then we learn to adapt and we realize that there is actually some merit to it. So I think this situation is something like that, which is forcing us to understand and try to reflect on what we were doing, how we were living our lives, and whether that was a sustainable lifestyle, a good lifestyle. Were we spending enough time with family? Were we doing enough reflection? Were we wasting too many resources? Were we overindulging? There are a number of those types of things that sort of cause us to reflect, and then saying, if I have to reorient my life, if I have to make a change in how I conduct myself personally, how much exercise I get, what do I eat, drink, how much time, how late should I stay out, when should I wake up? It's causing us to kind of go in and look at each of these activities. And then from a business standpoint, a professional standpoint, what are the kinds of, am I really doing things that are kirat type of living, earning a living? What should I do differently for my employees, for my business, for my day-to-day work, commuting? Can things be done differently? So I think this is a singular moment for us to re-examine many of these fundamental aspects, and the question is pretty broad. So while we may initially look at it as only the negative, in the spirit of Chardi Kala and optimism, a Sikh is always looking at it as saying, okay, these are new rules. What good can come out of it? And to look at it optimistically and say there is probably some good in here. We just have not discovered it fully yet. I'm not trying to minimize the challenges. I think the challenges are huge. The health challenges are there. The livelihood challenges are there. But we should also not look at it only as a detrimental thing, but something that might actually produce benefit in the long term. Meaning, even if you look at the overall deaths from other traffic accidents and other types of fatalities and crime, these things have gone down while fatalities have risen. Of course, if you're affected by the disease, it's a very different thing. But on the macro side of things, there has been some other changes too. So I think we can talk more about how I'm dealing with it on my business aspect and on my personal life aspect and stuff. But I think I'll stop here, and we can always go deeper into any of those.
Thank you so much. Dr. Kaur, what are your thoughts? I'm particularly interested in the organization you have and how that is making changes to deal with COVID.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for inviting me to this session. You know what? This COVID-19 has affected everyone's life. And the way we were doing business at work, seeing patients face to face, that has completely changed. We initially continued to see the patients at the clinic. Our staff became very fearful, and we also saw patients that were not following the rules, especially those people who were coming from outside the country. They were supposed to go to isolation for 2 weeks periods, and they were showing up in our office without gloves, without masks, putting everybody at risk. And so we had to decide. We decided to close our doors, and we are seeing patients on Zoom, on telemedicine, but not much is happening face to face. But initially, when the panic happened, people wanted to be tested. So we were seeing them. We would dress up, go outside into our back of the clinic, and we had patients lined up. It's like we were directing traffic, and so they were all waiting outside. You just come. I'm going to do your testing, and then he would leave then the next patient would come. So it was completely, we usually do it privately. It has to be confidential. Here we were doing these swabs back in the backyard, basically, and so the work changed. Things like my parents, they live only 5 houses down the street, and I didn't go visit my parents anymore because if just in case I had it, I didn't want to pass it on to them because I was getting exposed to people who had symptoms. What we saw initially in British Columbia was that a lot of people still had the flu. All the people who were going for COVID testing, they were coming back positive with the influenza. And within 10 days, influenza stopped in British Columbia. I didn't see any positive influenza after that because the social distancing, everybody taking precautions, it stopped influenza. So I thought that was pretty amazing. So that's a positive thing that came out of it. Less people had upper respiratory tract infections. So I think there's going to be good coming out of this because we're going to be taking better care of ourselves. The Women Rise, you mentioned there, that is in our organization, and we family and friends, we got together to work with our. I think the audience probably doesn't know why this organization came into being, so maybe I can touch a little bit on that. Abbotsford became an epicenter of gang violence in 2017-18, And one of the incidents, the last shooting of a young man was a 19-year-old Jagbir Singh Mully. He was coming home, driving home from university, and he was almost home. He was like 1 minute away from his home, and he was stopped and he was shot. And he had nothing to do with gangs and drugs. Basically, the whole city of Abbotsford was up in arms. And how could this happen? And I happened to visit the family, and the father basically said, "Yes, my son's gone, but this should not ever happen again in our town." And he asked us to work together, and we organize as women rights, men and women working together to make Abbotsford a better place. And as I mentioned earlier, it's been 18 months. We haven't had a shooting. We've been working with the police. We work with the city. We work with the politicians to bring more resources, bring more awareness, working with the gurdwaras, with the mandirs. Basically, everybody's working together. And when everybody works together, you see change. And because the same way COVID is affecting everybody, and hopefully everybody will work together and we can have a better world.
Thank you very much. Yes, it sounds like both of you have been doing different ways of working to change the community or change the world. And earlier in our conversation, Dr. Sani had mentioned that he likened COVID to being like the Rahao Tuk that Vaikji was using this as a pause for all of us to pause and reconsider. And as we look at Gurbani, Gurbani talks about Dukh Daru Sukh Rog Bhaya. And at some point we have to figure out, our life as we thought of it as Sukh, was that really, making us sick in all the different choices that we were doing? And is this Dukh come as our medicine? And so how do we use this Dukh? How do we use this medicine to transform our lives? How can we use Gurbani and our Sikhi values of Naam Japna, Van Chakna, Kirat Karni to sustain ourselves in this time, especially in a time where our usual normative behaviors are not possible. Our gurdwaras are closed, and a Sangat can't get together in physical means. We are separated from each other. Our livelihood is at stake for many, many people. And what's going to happen in the world is a big question mark. And so as we step into this moment, what do we learn from it? How does Sikhi sustain you at this time, and how do you see it helping you to go forward? Dr. Sani, would you like to go?
I think if you look at the three pillars of Sikhi, as you pointed out, Naam Japna, Van Chakna, and Kirat Karna, the Sikhi, to some extent, when it was established, it was creating a system that did not need to be institutionalized, in that it did not need to have a physical presence that you must go only to the church or must go only to the temple to be able to achieve your connection with Vaheguru. Which is not to say that the concept of Sangat was not very powerful, because I think the concept of Sangat and the harmony and the good vibrations that come from the Sangat are very, very powerful. And I think they collectively lift everybody up. So that is a very important aspect. And that is something that we, with this social distancing, will be curtailed to some extent. But what we have seen, for example, in our Gurdwara over here, we started a digital channel called Nishkam TV. And Nishkam TV is able to broadcast the Kirtan, even though the Bhai Sahibs are and the Sangat is singing Kirtan isolated. But everybody is collectively still there. So I think what this is doing is saying that the physicality of the Gurdwara building is not something you need to be worried about, but it is the togetherness of the Sangat and the vibrations that you're getting. You may be a little bit longer distance, but you can still feel them. You can still feel them and be collectively immersed in that experience. So while you can also do, given the fact that this Rahao, as we talked about, which is causing everybody to sit down and pause and reflect a little bit. So how is not just a pause, it is pause and reflect to think what it is that you're going to be doing differently. I think never in the history, in near history, have we had such a pause where collective action has ceased. Even when there is a war, or even when there is 9/11 or something like that, collective action had not ceased to the level that it has ceased now, where you interacting with other human beings itself has become a risky proposition and a challenge. Most of human existence as a social animal is based on interacting with other people, and our concept of Sangat is also deeply imbued with that. But the concept of Sangat is, some aspect of it is physical, but I think a lot of it is connecting at a spiritual, emotional level. And I think that is still possible with technology. We just need to pivot, we need to change. So those might be some things that come from it. In terms of Kirat Karna, yeah, I think it is a time for us to examine our lifestyle of what and choice of work that we've done. Some of us may not have the luxury to do that because we have to do what we have to do. But if those of us who do have the luxury to do that, to reimagine how we are conducting ourselves, are we doing things that really, truly help not only our fellow being, but the environment, the world at large, the Mata Dharat? Are we in a sustainable world? And are the actions that we are taking sustainable or not? It's forcing us to kind of reevaluate that and cut out, say, excessive travel, which is not amounting to much. So I think there'll be some good that comes from it, where people who don't need to travel shouldn't be traveling. Many things can be accomplished like we are doing today without having sort of the physical. In fact, we may find that some things are accomplished better. For example, this webinar will be recorded and people who aren't able to make it live can listen to it afterwards. So we may discover new things. So being eternally optimistic, which is the nature of a Sikh, to look at and live in Chardi Kala, to not be down in times like this, but to say what good can come out of it, what can I do differently, how can I reorient my life, my business, my work, my interactions, and am I living a more sustainable life? So that Sarbat da Bhala means not only Bhala of Sikhs, other human beings, but other living creatures and inorganic, the world, the earth at large. Because I think a lot of this seems to be almost like the earth having a virus, and the virus is us actually, which is sort of depleting things of resources and with no pushback from creatures and things that don't have a voice. So I think in that aspect, we should examine what we are doing from a Kirat standpoint and saying, are we truly doing Kirat? And then the one chakna, I think, goes without saying, the concept of dan, the concept of giving. If you have anything which is, you have, and I think you have itself is a foreign kind of a concept as far as true for a true Sikh, which is that it is not yours, it's just your a temporary custodian. It just happens to be that somehow wealth or whatever else has parked itself close to you, but it is not yours to have or yours to give away even. So I think part of that should be is sharing. If you have it, it's there for to share with other people, and particularly in these times where a lot of folks whose lives were depending on service providing and interacting with other people. Meaning, for example, we have our personal trainers, folks who come over and do work with us. You have to kind of reach out. Some of those folks are not able to earn a lifestyle, so but it's transient. Hopefully, that will return. But in this difficult time, one can reach out and help in many of those aspects. Certainly, there are projects that are a tactical level that people are doing. There are, we're helping out with a University of Texas has a ventilator type of a project, those types of things. So there are many projects that we will find within our surrounding. My son is doing things where they're making masks and stuff, PPE equipment for hospitals, etc. So I'm sure all of us can find things around us where we are able to give and help out. So instead of being Sikhs are people of action, we want to make sure that we are active, we are involved in the community, and there are many ways, and I'm sure we can all find ways to give back to the community from tan, man, and dhan. It is not only about dhan, it is about tan and man. And even if we have to give people solace, reaching out over the phone, reaching out over Zoom to friends that we haven't talked to in a while, family members that we haven't talked to in a while, or other people that may have a need. There are several surrounding old age homes where particularly the disease has ravaged things quite a bit, nursing homes, etc. reaching out in those places to give people hope, solace, exchange a few kind words. It costs nothing, but it gives people a sense of community, of togetherness.
Thank you. Dr. Carlo, I was curious about you have done this wonderful job of making a big change in Abbotsford with your community organization and involving the young people. I'm curious as to how you are using this to pass on the message of Gurbani to the young people and drawing them in, and how what's happening these days with them as they go through this period of COVID. What are they taking part in and doing?
So one of the changes, one of the decisions as a collective we made was to bring our youngsters into the Gurdwara. And we have a gentleman named Baltej Singh. He's an RCMP officer, retired now, but he's got the talent. He does kirtan, he does katha, he can connect with the young people. And so in 2019, we got all the Gurdwaras involved in Abbotsford. We would have one program after program. Like in January of 2008 and 19, we had 3 programs at each of the 3 Gurdwaras in Abbotsford. And then we did another 3 in May, June, and July. And then we did another 2 programs in the fall. And Baltej Singh has this, he connects with the young people. And young people were flocking to the Gurdwaras because he also speaks in English. And we're going to have to adjust how we spread the message. We got to use the medium that our youth understands. So often kids go to the Gurdwara, they do Matha Tek. That's about it. They don't understand what the Guru is trying to say, what the Kirtan is trying to tell them, what the Kathavachik is trying to tell them. So they experience the concept of Sangat, but they don't really get the true message of the Guru. And Baltej Singh has a special talent. He's able to connect with the youth. My children love listening to Baltej Singh. So what we're doing now is every evening at 5 o'clock, Baltej Singh continues on Facebook, and he does Kirtan and he does Simran, and that's how we connect. And then people send messages to him, and he answers questions, and so that we are continuing with Gurbani, Kirtan, Simran. That is the essence. If you can instill the Guru's values within ourselves and to our children, there's nothing better, in my opinion. So the other thing was because of the Gurdwaras are closed, Langar has also closed in the Gurdwaras, and some of the people living on the streets, they used to go to the Gurdwaras and have Langar there. And one of the things we've been doing is having Langar once a month for them. And they asked us, when are the Gurdwaras going to open? And because we used to go there very often for meals. And so our women rights organization, we got together and we decided to take the Langar to these people 4 times a week. So the Gurdwaras have been contributing, preparing the Langar, and our volunteers, they go to the streets, they hand out the food. It was not only feeding the hungry, but we also wanted to get the youth involved, and that's been very successful. And we've been very successful at that. More and more young people are volunteering. They want to do this seva. They see once they see other people are doing, they want to participate in that as well. So we're very, very pleased with how things are progressing and with our Langar. I think making a broader statement, I think the Sikh community, the Sikh nation has done very well, whether it's in New Delhi, whether it's in England, whether in the US or Canada. I think we're getting a very positive response from the general community. I think, as I mentioned earlier, we need to take the message of the Guru and share it with the world as well, because Guru Granth Sahib Ji is not only meant for the Sikhs, but it's meant for the whole world. It's a Jagat Guru, means it's for the whole world. And if you can share that message of the Guru, we will make a better place to live in.
Yes, it's interesting. I hear about what you're doing and about what other people, our communities have been doing, and the Sikhs have very much taken the concept of Kirat and Panchakna and service and seva and are going ahead with it. As I reflect on that, it makes me reminds me of sort of the concept of Dan and Sikhi, and as Bhai Singh has talked about it too. Dan is at some level more than just giving. You can give of yourself, you can give your time, your money, your service. There are many ways to give, but giving is Dan is more than that. It's almost a route. It's an exercise to actually hone our own selves so that we can get to a point where we are giving without any seeking of compensation or recognitions ourselves, because that's how Gurbani says, when we can do that and when we can look at every person around us and see Vaiguruji reflected in them, given the classic example of Bhai Kanhaiya Ji. He saw Guru Gobind Singh's Murat in every soldier that was lying wounded in battle, irrespective of who they were. And so Dan sort of encompasses that sense of being beyond us, beyond ourselves. And so just taking that on, I'm curious also about your thoughts about what we think we should do. At this point, obviously, the need of the hour is to feed people and help them. But in the long run, it needs to be more than feeding people's bodies. It's feeding our souls. How do we take the concept of Dan and try to make it so that we can give back more as a community and as Sikhs? And in that sense, it's very different from sort of the philanthropy in the Western world. And Dr. Kaur, what do you think about that? How do you see your efforts and your organization, continuing on in the future in the changed world that we have?
Basically, Guru Nanak Dev Ji tells us in Japji Sahib, "Badda data til na tamaye." Basically, God is the Creator is giving us everything, and He asks for nothing in return. And then you've been mentioning Bhai Singh. He's basically saying the same thing, that it's really not ours to give, and when we give, when we get ego out of it, we haven't achieved anything. Akhan jor, chupe na jor, jor na mangan, der na jor. We don't even have the capacity. Guru is telling us it's not really. There's an inner power that's inside of us that's helping us achieve all that we're achieving. So yes, we need to continue, but we would need to be mindful that it's really the true giver is our Creator. He's given us a life. He's given us creation to experience this life, and yes, it's very, very important to share. Sikhs are generally very good at sharing. Guru has given us this concept of this fund where we give a portion of our earnings for the betterment of others, and so that we can share our Sikh values and messages as well. So we need to continue with that. I wanna share a short story with you about Bhai Maskin Ji. He came across a Sikh once, and he was very upset. He was crying, and Bhai Maskin Ji asked him what's going on, and he said, "This is the first time in my life. This month I cannot give this fund because he earned a very small amount, like 100 rupees, and this month he couldn't give his 10 rupees to the Guru's Golak." And so I think every Sikh is a sort of is a philanthropist, because they are sharing. They're always sharing part of their earnings for the betterment of others. In our community, we plan to continue to work with the youth, work with our city, work with the police to make Abbotsford a better place. And Gurbani is the center to us. Simran is a center to us. Every Sundays we do Simran together. It's disrupted for the time being, but I think it's going to open up, and it's just a matter of time. And we need to learn from this time how this is a pause, like Faisal I mentioned, is we need to learn from this so that we can do a better job in the future.
That's wonderful. Dr. Sani, as an entrepreneur, I'm curious about what you see looking ahead. How can we use sort of an entrepreneurial perspective and to take it to talk about giving, and how do we morph giving in a time when many people are going to have just financial difficulties and other challenges already facing them?
Sure. So I'll talk about it from two perspectives. One is sort of I'm a chemical engineer. So chemical engineers tend to look at processes. There's an input, there's an output, and then there's something happening, say a reactor or some accumulation. So what you want to do is to make sure that things keep moving. Things are going out. If it is wealth, for example, or resources being consumed or whatever, there's things. So what we want to do, individual, is to figure out, should we be actually, each of us be consuming as many resources? Second is sort of the accumulation aspect of it. Whether it is, and what I mean by accumulation is there wealth disparity growing? In a time of crisis like this, there's an opportunity for people to profit from this. So profiteering, etc. Don't do that, because that is causing greater disparity to grow. And then comes the output. The output, in fact, this is an opportunity for us to increase our output to be able to decrease that accumulation, whether you call that philanthropy or dawn or whatever it might be. It is that we've got a reservoir of excess, and that excess should be used to make alterations. Now, when you use the word philanthropy, it has an anthropocentric word, which actually I don't quite like that word, because it just means liking people. Phil, liking, love for, anthropy, people. Well, what about all the other creatures in the world? It's a very arrogant view for us to look at it as saying man is only supreme and we're just part of the whole continuum. We're part of everything else that is interconnected. And if this crisis doesn't remind us how pushing wildlife to the brink of extinction and exploiting them doesn't come back to bite the anthropocentric view, then I don't know what it is. So I think we need to actually look at it from the standpoint of philanthropy, quotes, that we need to not only watch out for our fellow human beings, which is sort of the firefighting mode that we're doing, because this is what is front and center for us, and people are dying, and it's just naturally that this could happen to me. But I think that is also looking at it is from a very selfish perspective of, because it affects me or it could affect me, I'm going to do something about it. No, it should be something that we do because we are part of this continuum and we have changed the balance of what things are. So we should be looking long-term strategically as to what differences we will do in our conduct to create a sustainable lifestyle. So what I would say is that in a short term, we need to feed people. We need to give people lifestyle, some jobs, and we need to provide medicines and create vaccines, etc. But my view is all of this is actually relatively short-term firefighting, because the next pandemic and the next pandemic can emerge. What this is telling us is step back and reflect. Go how? Think about what is going on, what is fundamentally these things to actually emerge, and where is the tinder that catches fire each time for these wildfires to propagate. And it is good, needed. But eventually you have to say, well, think about fire prevention instead of firefighting. So our efforts of sort of philanthropy, so to speak, should be directed in equal measure towards firefighting and preventing. Prophylaxis and prevention, nobody wants to fund initially vaccines, companies, and as entrepreneurs business plan, whenever I have some friends who are trying to get vaccine companies off the ground, even now they're getting a lot of interest. But earlier, nobody would want to invest in a vaccine because they're like, yeah, you sell it once and you're done. I want to sell a drug that I can keep selling to the patient repeatedly. So we almost need to, I dare, like a Daswand or a hundredth, if not a tenth, which goes towards maintenance of the common good, of the environment, of the sustainable lifestyles, things that will allow us to look at new philanthropic models or new models which are directed towards conservation in a much broader sense of sustainability, because we have one planet, we have only a certain number, and we are having a disproportion. In fact, scientists are calling this the Anthropocene. Term planning to prevent these types of pandemics and epidemics. And to some extent, it is still selfish because it is threatening our own self. We need to be driven by higher purpose of Sarbat da Bhala. Sarbat doesn't only mean human beings, it means other things too. So let's try to figure out what is it that we're going to do from a philanthropic perspective. So from an entrepreneurial side, I would say I look at it as a problem. There is a need. So there are three things that go into an entrepreneurial perspective that I have. Brains, sweat, and money. Brains is sort of what is the need, what is the problem. That's pretty amply clear to us as to what the problem is over here. Then comes the question of sweat. Are there people who are like-minded and who can believe in this? And I feel that Sikhs are ideally suited for that perspective. And I don't mean the word Sikh in nominally. I think anybody who is living by the principles of underlying Sikhi is a Sikh. And a Sikh who is a turban-wearing Sikh like me, if he's not living by the principles of Sikhi, is not a Sikh. I think we need to kind of also look towards not just a narrow definition of what Sikhs are. And if that is the sweat part that goes into the endeavor. And then third part is the money part. And I think money, we will need to figure out what role can be played where everybody contributes a little bit. Those who are making more money contribute more, just the principle of that's one type of thing. Those who are making less contribute less, but everybody contributes something to be able to give back to not only the anthropocentric view, but to the larger perspective. So that, because Western thought has taught us to think about human beings as supreme. Human beings are unique because we have the power of reflection. The Manuk Janam is supposed to be kind of higher up because it gives us the power of reflection. But if you're not using that reflection properly, then we are no better than any other animal in that regard. So I think this is a time for us to reflect how we will change our philosophy in interacting and conducting ourselves in the world.
Yes, it's a lot. It's a challenging time that we are in right now, and I just want to take a moment actually to reach out to our audience and remind them that if they have any questions or reflections for us, that they can post them on the question and question board on the chat screen. And please do remember to mention your name and the city that you are in. Thank you. So I would like to continue to talk a little bit more about sort of the future. And although looks like Dr. Sani is going to be coming right back with us. Okay. As we look at the future and at this turning point, this inflection point, and that is happening, there are lots and lots of things to do. But to try to bring the focus back down a little bit towards our own community and to Sikhi and to using both the principles of Sikhi and perpetuating Sikhi, especially among our youth. What can we do to what do you see as new pathways that we can forge as we go ahead, given that, like we said, we're not physically able to get together and also our kids are sometimes not engaged in the physical Gurdwara that we've had. So could we use this time, and how can we use it? What do you envisage that the future can look like to bring in the youth so that they can access the wealth of Gurbani and realize what it means in their daily living? Dr. Carlo, would you like to?
Personally, I spend a lot of time on YouTube. It's amazing how much is out there. You punch in any shabd and you can get 10 kirtaniyas singing that kirtan for you. So there's a wealth out there. The idea is getting people to get to that path. We need to convince our young people how beneficial it is for them to understand Gurbani and understand the message of the Guru. Gur ki mattu le yane, bhagat bana bahut dubbe syane. I mean, basically, Guruji is telling you, listen to the Guru, otherwise you are going to drown in the world. This Maya is going to take us and torment us. It might feel pleasing to you at the moment, but in the long run, it's going to get to you somehow. So what we need to do is we need to come up with messages aimed at the youth, though. I understand the message, so I have no problems. Fortunately, I grew up in India, and I have a good understanding of Punjabi, and I had a good understanding of, I can read and write Punjabi as well. So when I can punch in any shabd, I can listen to it, I mostly understand it. And then we have things like apps like iGurbani. So you can also punch in that shabd in iGurbani, and it gives you exactly what the shabd is all about, and in Punjabi and in English. So I think we need to explain that to our youth as well, that you can access this. So we sort of need a medium so that we can share where they can go to understand different messages that are out there. And then maybe if there are gaps in that, we need to fill in those gaps. The organizations like SikhRI or the other Sikhi to the Max and all those the organizations, that's where they need to come in and fill in these gaps. And we as Sikhs, we need to contribute towards these organizations so they can be successful organizations. Otherwise, if they don't have the financial abilities, they cannot fill in these gaps. That's very, very important.
Dr. Sani, what do you think we should do to engage the youth? Because, as Dr. Kala pointed out, there is actually quite a lot available. Some of it is wonderful and some of it is questionable. But what can we do to engage our youth in order to get them to where they are even accessing stuff?
So I think one aspect is that, yes, there is a lot of wealth of information out there. The question is, will anybody go and look? There is wealth of information in the Granth Sahib, but the ability for people to learn, interpret, and to be able to understand what is the message in there can be challenging. So I think young people, most people, not only young people, are motivated by role models. And I think the role model, this is where even if you look back, the Janam Sakhis, etc., had a role to play because they humanized the context and they imparted a message from that. So maybe there is a thought that we could have some kind of a modern day Janam Sakhi equivalent, because people could look at it and say, well, those were things from 500 years ago and stuff, and now things are different. But maybe there are equivalent things of this part that motivate people. We create some role models where people say, yeah, I can understand this. This is something that is applicable to my life. And they then reach out and then they take an interest. You've got to have an initial hook that gets them engaged. If there isn't that initial hook, then they are lost in the ocean and they're never going to go and dive below the surface. I mean, most of us go on top of the ocean. There is a lot more ocean underneath, but we never kind of go below scratch the surface. So I think to do that, role models play a big role, because they will also be able to speak the language that these youth right now are speaking, which unfortunately or fortunately is not the lingua franca, isn't the languages. At that time when the Granth Sahib was authored, that was the lingua franca. Everybody understood what the common people spoke, and that language was attempted to be put down. Language has evolved since then, and people now are speaking different languages. So we have to be able to provide a way for them to understand that. And I think it gets exemplified, just like when you try to tell people about Sikhi, a non-Sikh person, for example, if you talk about the principle of langar, the principle of langar suddenly brings together the fact that everybody is equal, nourishment, giving, service. So many concepts can somehow be exemplified in that, seeing what langar embodies. So by taking that, everybody can understand what a meal is. And they then understand the aspects of what goes into the meal, the preparation, the service, the community, and it suddenly makes sense to them. They get it. So I think it's the same sort of a thing over here when you're taking a complex message, which has, in a language that people don't, the young folks, or myself for that matter, don't fully understand. And then by taking good role models, so we should find within our community good role models that can speak to the youth in that regard, because ultimately it's about living your life. It's about sort of how you conduct yourself on some principles on a day-to-day basis, and how do you sort of internally reflect upon things. It's a very personal experience, and then that circle of good people, good role models, becomes a Sangat. And that Sangat can be anywhere in the world. It can be decentralized, and technology allows us connectivity to this Sangat. We can reimagine how what will be the new experience. And I think the new generation is looking for something of that sort for gathering. I'm not saying we do this only on social media, because I think social media has created against this bipolar type of response of, fear and reward type of a thing, that how many likes did I get, and that was my reward, and I'm afraid nobody liked me, and so I'm now anxious about this. I think that is not the way for us. We need to sort of rise above this polarity that the Western thought is forcing upon us, of fear and greed type of a thing, of good and bad, of heaven and hell. We should not be looking at polar responses in this fashion, but live ourselves in an eternal thing of Chardi Kala, knowing what we know is within us is good. And the Guru is going to help us bring that out and reinforce that, so that we can live our lives properly and in a spirit of Chardi Kala. So I think finding role models, connecting them with technology to be able to kind of give people some pointers, but so that they want to come. We shouldn't be forcing the young people to come. They should want to join on their own. And that when as an entrepreneur, I always look for, if I'm finding another entrepreneur to take over a new venture, I want to see them pulling. I'm not going to be there pushing them, because pushing is an exhausting process. Day in and day out, you're going to be pushing people. That's not how things get done. Things get done when people automatically. So when Guru Gobind Singh Ji laid out the vision for the Khalsa, it was a pull, the ultimate pull, saying this is the aspirational vision. Who's in? And then people stepped up and they pulled. And when those Panch Pyaras pulled, a whole bunch of other people joined and everybody was pulling. We are going to a push model now, where we're trying to push our kids that go do this, go do this. If they don't see the value, it's going to be a pushing uphill ultimately that say, you know what, I don't understand anything that goes on in the Gurdwara Sahib. Thank you very much, but I'm not going to come. As small kids, we can get them. When they get to be teenagers, it becomes an uphill task, and then we lose them after some point in time. So it is up to us to be able to create an experience for them, which is something that they understand, they can empathize, they can get value from. And when they see that, they will be pulled, and they will pull a lot of people along with them. And then we will hopefully realize a different vision.
So we have a question here from Rupinder Kaur. I'm not sure where they're connecting from. Are there any resources or Bani translations available in simple terms for elementary kids which can help this generation to start automatically stepping into the path of Sikhi? Do either of you have an idea about any simple translations available for this generation?
On this topic, so I would humbly say that right from the outset, that no, what I try to do is to speak to my children from the limited things, imperfect things that I myself might know. But I'm sure that the Sikh Research Institute itself offers a lot of wealth of that information. I was surprised by looking at their website as to the depth of information that's out there. And I know that Inni ji has authored many good children's books that speak to some of those aspects for elementary school age kids. The Khalsa schools that are run by many of the Gurdwaras and the curriculum that's there speaks a lot to those. So I think I would explore those areas for one.
Yes, actually, I think that their Sikh Research Institute does have some books. They're not maybe direct translations, some of them, but they are taking the concepts and values in Sikhi and highlighting them. So there are definitely lots of good children's books, and thanks to Ini Benji. There are some others that are starting to come out. I think it's interesting, but a Google search might reveal some. There are authors coming up in the UK and in California who have taken a Shabad and have tried to interpret it for kids in a sort of a kids way of doing it. And so some of those are available online that way. And then we have another question from actually Inni Panji in Connecticut. She says, it seems like the world is grieving, and there seems to be a lot of talk about this being COVID being a punishment from a so-called God. And she would love to know what we think about it from different perspectives. And my thinking would be that we have a lot of Sikhi has a lot of strong emphasis on hukam, and this would be an interesting time to figure out what, Dr. Alo, what do you think about the concept of hukam? And is it a punishment, or what is it?
That's a very difficult question. Guruji tells us, Tiska hukam booj sukh hoy, tiska naam rakh kant proy. Understanding hukam is very, very difficult, but this is part of the COVID is part of our life. And we have to accept it. We have no choice. And if we try to question it, why, we will run into problems. So it is. So we accept it. And how do we improve our lives? How do we go around it? How do we help ourselves? How do we help our children? How do we help our communities? That's the right path. And we look to the Guru. He tells it in the next, Tiska hukam booj sukh hoy. If you understand the hukam, we will have peace. And Tiska naam rakh kant proy. Put it around your neck. Naam. Put the naam in your heart. That's, to me, Bani and Naam is not only for the mind, it's for the whole body. Every cell in our body has intelligence. And Bani is not just for the mind, it's for the whole body. And the Bani has to go into our hearts. That's the biggest concept that I understand from the Gurbani. Prabhike simran man ki mal jaye, amrit naam hrid mein samaye. Put it into your heart. Heart, I digress, but the heart has more electrical energy than the mind. It's 100 times more powerful electrically than the mind. The heart's magnetic field is 5,000 times more powerful than the brain. Once the heart is happy, Gurbani says, Kamal Pargas, Prabhika Saman Kamal Pargas, the heart opens up. And when the heart opens up, the whole body is in a different mode. So Bani has to enter our hearts. Naam has to enter our hearts. We can't be just reciting it like a mechanical machine. It has to enter every part of our body. And when it does, your experience is different. And then you understand hukam. Everything is created by the Creator. We are here to experience to the fullest, and we're not going to experience that. We can't be fighting why. We can't live in fear. Fear is basically anxiety, for example, is a fearful thoughts about the future. We can't live that way. The Guru teaches us to live in the moment. Depression is sad thoughts about the past. We take those thoughts away. We live in the moment, and the fear and anxiety are both depression and anxiety are gone. And the only way to do that is try to understand the Shabd and try to and repeat the Shabd and understand and place it in your heart and in your mind and your body. And when you do that, we start to understand hukam as well.
Very nice. Yes, it's sort of interesting. At some level, it seems like you need both Chardi Kala and hukam, and they're flip sides of the same thing in a way, because if you are in Chardi Kala, you're accepting hukam, and if you accept hukam, you're in Chardi Kala in a way. We have another question from Sharon Kaur in Chicago. She says, now that COVID has made our community rethink how we can serve our communities and understand the true concept of langar, what advice would you give all Sikhs listening today that we should think even bigger in time of need to not only serve longer to vulnerable populations of societies, but can you share other ways that we as a community can come together to make an impact? Dr. Sani, would you like to take a go on that?
So, meaning, I think I spoke about the concept of sort of, the focusing not only on our immediate community and on humans, but also on understanding sort of the root cause of what caused these types of pandemics. This is a conflict that is happening with human existence to some extent, in conflict with the nature. And if you look at whether you look at saying, janam, we have different janams. The human janam is regarded as being the highest order because we have the ability to reflect and think and control our senses. So in this regard, if there is things that we can do to examine more deeply the reasons why these types of pandemics are emerging because of overexploitation of resources, maybe we go beyond serving langar and start thinking about how we will create more sustainability.
Dr. Carlo, tell me about how you think that you can take, I know you're already, your organization is working to give food to the homeless that you've been working at. Where do you see it going in the future with expanding and bringing the kids along?
One of the things that we're working on for the future is to have after-school programs for the kids. When the parents are working, the kids come home, they have nobody observing them, and they fall into the wrong path. And we're trying to. This program already exists in Abbotsford, but we want to bring it to all the schools as well, so that they can be participating in sports, arts, easier schooling, so that they can complete their homework. They will have assistance for that. They will have fun playing sports. Exercise is so important for your well-being. And nowadays, what we see is kids are always on their phones or they're on their computer. They don't even go outside into the sunlight, which is so important for your well-being. So we want to engage these youngsters so that they can be exercising, so that they be interacting with the adults, they're interacting with each other, rather than, sometimes we see kids sitting together, but all of them are on their phones. And it's a very, very difficult fight to get them off their phones and then get them engaged. And so that's sort of what we're working on working together with the school district, is getting the kids to be more engaged in the community, with each other, with the adults, with the teachers. And so that's what one of the aims over the next year or so is, to get the after school programs going all across Abbotsford.
That's wonderful. Thinking that it'd be really interesting to know, we've talked about the community, we've talked about a lot of some of the changes, but I'm wondering how each of you in your own ways has really sort of responded to a change within yourself in the face of COVID. What do you think has happened to you, and how you have processed and planned for the future, given what's happening right now? Dr. Sani?
I think, let me talk firstly at the physical level. I've tried to take this, I can't go to the gym anymore. So I've taken down to sort of simpler ways of exercising. So I walk 7 to 8 miles a day. The dog is, I think, a little tired of me by now, kind of a thing. But I've lost some weight. I've improved my health in that regard. I've gone towards not eating much of a dinner, so sort of having just a very light dinner, so more like 2 meals a day. So I've cut down the overall food consumption. It's actually improved my health. It's lowered my blood pressure. It's allowed me to sort of become healthier in general and lose some weight and stuff like that. So that on a physical level is something that I've done, because now I don't have to go for as many business dinners and things of that nature, and I don't eat outside in restaurants as much. So it's less unhealthy food, etc. So it's actually been good. The second aspect of sort of, from the standpoint of family, I mean, I'm spending a lot more time with the kids, and I can just take more interest in their lives and stuff, whether or not they may like it. But I think it's helping. We actually play a lot of games together, so quality time with the family has improved. Reaching out to friends has improved more. So, we do a lot more Zoom calls with my undergraduate, folks that I went to college with, etc., our family, etc. So we actually have gotten closer over there too. So that's a benefit that has come about. From the standpoint of the professional life and some of the companies, we have found new ways through Microsoft Teams to collaborate. There is some detriment that we can't do the lab work, and some of the manufacturing challenges are there where it's harder to kind of get work done. But we orchestrated a move we moved our company in this a couple of weeks ago to a new location, and the whole move happened, and everybody was able to kind of get to the new facility, get it operational. And so that's also working out. In fact, we are in the process of launching a new company in this process, and I'm daily on calls with doctors and with regulatory experts. I spoke to the FDA. Even the FDA folks are sitting at home, and they were still able to take calls and things. So what we are finding is that everybody is experiencing this. When a global event like this happens, everybody experiences, and everybody's cutting a little bit of slack in terms of being less harsh with each other, accommodating, understanding perspectives. Here's an opportunity. So I think being optimistic, you can always look at it saying, yeah, there's a bunch of negative stuff, but it's also an opportunity to do things a little bit differently, and for us to kind of accommodate each other a little bit more.
Dr. Kahlo, why don't we switch to you?
Yes, so there's been a lot of changes in my life as well. Work has changed. We're doing mostly telemedicine now, which means I can actually work from home as well. I still go to the office, and we still talk to our staff and doctors, but in the afternoons I often work from home. Everything is available on my computer now. I can e-fax any prescription that needs to be sent or a blood test that needs to be done. I can just send it from my computer. It's simple as that. And we were sort of forced to do all this in the last few weeks. And then again, yes, the families are on. My kids are doing online school, so I see them a lot more than I was seeing them before, which is a really positive thing. And we have dinner together, and we share stories, and we discuss things a lot more than we were doing before, because everybody was so busy doing the way of doing things. But it's stopped. All that has changed. I used to play badminton 3 times a week, and we haven't been able to do that, so I miss that. But I exercise at home. But I still want to go back to badminton as soon as possible, because it's studies show racquetball games are very, very beneficial for your long-term mobility and mental being as well. So people who are facing dementia, racquetball is very highly recommended as well. So sports, it's important. I mean, look at all those people who used to watch. Their favorite thing was to come home and watch sports. They're not able to do that. It's been hard on some of my patients. It's not something I did, but my patients complain they can't watch TV, they can't watch sports. So it's going to be nice once all the sports come back online as well. Yes, and we've been doing a lot of Zoom meetings, a lot more than we did because it's far more convenient to do Zoom meetings for me than to physically travel from one place to another, which I have often had to take time off to do that. I no longer have to take the time off, or if I have to, it's a small portion of my day. So it's much more convenient.
I'm also particularly interested in, we each of us has a different way of reacting to this whole thing. When it all first started, I remember as a physician who was working in the hospital, before we knew what was coming, we could see it coming, and it was all a big unknown. And you knew something was going to hit, but you didn't know what it was going to be like. And it made me realize, as you look at yourself, that it's so easy to be fearful, to not know what's going on, to don't know if we have the capacity to deal with it. And then on a personal level, to realize that, you could die. And it was interesting to suddenly have that question, even though we should really keep that front and center in our lives, but we don't. Gurbani tells us over and over again that it's this life is so ephemeral and it's gone, and we just have this moment, and we don't live in the moment, but we forget that we will die, and we amass things, and we amass issues, and we amass fights, and we amass, and we don't realize that we go with all that debt around our neck, so to speak. And so it's been an interesting pause to sort of reflect on that and say, what really is important? What is it that we want to take with us? What is it that we want to leave? And who are we leaving it for? And in what form? How do we engage kids that we want to leave stuff for? What form do we leave it in that they can actually use it? Or is it going to become something in a dusty museum? And I speak specifically of Sikhi because for me, Sikhi is very alive, and in my daily sort of actions, I try to center myself on that and try to use that as the foundation of what I do. Not always successfully, but that's sort of my goal. And I like to read Gurbani and I like to understand it. But it's interesting to me, and I think about it more. I think now even about how can we make it as living and breathing alive for our kids and the next generation? How do we engage them? How do we make them feel that this is a value to them as well? What are the forms we can take? So I would appreciate what do you think has been going on? How have you been coping with this uncertainty, and what do you think is worth leaving, working on?
So I think, uncertainty is a fact of life. I think those of us who think that we have certainty are somewhat delusional in that regard. It doesn't mean that one doesn't plan. One needs to have a plan, but one should realize that plans can be altered in a blink of an eye. We may be arrogant to think that we are in full control of our destiny, but realizing that we are just another piece in the grand puzzle, and things can change in the blink of the eye. I'm reminded of there was I think a Janam Sakhi where somebody had come to Guru Nanak Dev Ji and asking him, saying, you're a all-seeing, all-learning, learned person. Can you tell me how long I'm going to live? Is it going to be, will I live to see my grandchildren grow up, and will I see my daughter married off, and 20 years, 30 years? Guru Nanak Dev Ji's answer to him was that we don't even know this breath that is going out of our body, will it actually come back? So that is the transient nature of what life is and the uncertainty that we live with. And particularly in the age of a respiratory virus like COVID, it becomes all the more important, saying that that next breath that you're taking in, is it the one that may actually kill you? So it never before has things come into such sharp focus so acutely. But I think going into a fearful, regressive mode, where one is afraid of everything around you and sort of shrinks down, is not the path of a Sikh. The path of the Sikh is to be appropriately aware, but at the same time not fearful and optimistic, and look towards, okay, these are the new rules of the game. These are new rules. How do I adapt myself to the new rules and conduct myself with the principles? I have a moral compass inside me, which guides me on things. I don't need a rule book. I don't need, of course, it's helpful to have the town tell you what to do and the CDC to tell you what to do and how to conduct yourselves and how to. Anyway, so the point of all of this is that we shouldn't live fearful. We should be cautious, but at the same time start looking, be outward looking, not be only inward for reflection, but outward for action.
I just want to make a comment about that as well. I started reading Gurbani in grade 8, 9. I think I mentioned that earlier in my biography that I went to the Gurdwara and Bhai Sahib was doing a katha about Bhai Gopalaji, how he was doing Japji Sahib, and Guru Hargobind explained to him the benefit of Japji Sahib and how much, and that was an inspiration for me. My parents were there, my brothers and sisters were there. The Guru connected with me that day, and I understood what he was saying. So I came home and started memorizing Japji Sahib. Uh, Trust me, I had no idea what I was reading. I just memorized it and continued to memorize it. And few days ago, I went for a walk with my daughter, and she asked me a question. She says, "Are you happy?" I thought that was a beautiful question, and I started reflecting. And I remember those grade 9 and 10, those years were perhaps the happiest years of my life. And maybe it was just because Gurbani was because a young person has less needs, and Gurbani provides so much for you, even though I did not understand it. So when I came to university a few years later, that was the first time I was able to get a hold of translations of Gurbani. And at the same time, I was studying psychology. And I was fascinated how the gurus captured human understanding 500 years ago, and it was relevant to me in 1989. Every time there's a crisis, every time there's a problem, if you can go back to the Guru will bring you back to true reality. The Guru will have a solution for your problem. Guru brings a message of hope. Guru tells you that you can change your destiny. Guru tells you that anything is possible. Uh, the more you understand Gurbani, the more you reflect on the Gurbani, it will give you the tools to deal with any problem. The main issue is how do we bring people to the Guru? That's the main issue. And uh, I think we need to have more sessions. We need to have more conferences. How do we engage our youth? How do we tell our youth Gurbani is essence of life? It's gonna help you in every aspect of your life. And how do we engage the whole world? How do we tell the whole world we have something? We have a treasure. ਪਿਓ ਦਾਦੇ ਦਾ ਖੋਲ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਖਜ਼ਾਨਾ ਤਾਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਮਨ ਪਾਇਆ ਨਿਦਾਨਾ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਖਾਵੋ ਖਰਚੋ ਰਲ ਮਲ ਪਾਈ ਤੋਟ ਨਾ ਆਵੇ ਵੱਧ ਹੋ ਜਾਏ this treasure it continues to feed us. We just need to be able to share it. We need to be able to tell the world about it.
That's very true. That's actually, brings together both of what you were saying. One is bringing the new kids on board, the younger generation on board is critically important. And, as you pointed out, Dr. Sani, it's the pull is more powerful than the push. And the question is, are we doing enough to open up the door to them in terms of not telling them, oh, this is wonderful, do this, do this, do this. But how can we act so that we can actually invite them in and say, you tell us, what do you think you need? Are we giving them an opportunity? It's a good question because kids will often, especially younger generation growing up here, to make them, they have to be convinced that this is important. And it's easy as an adult to say, oh, I know that this is of value, and I'm telling you to do this. But I think maybe we as adults need to figure out a way where we can invite them to the conversation to be an equal partner and say, what is it that you need? And how can we fulfill that? What can we do together?
So one suggestion might be is that we, for example, have gone to a few days in the week, but not every day. But doing, say, Japji Sahib part in the morning and then taking a walk from the pothis we have, and then doing the ardas. And when we ask the kids, sort of, what is a question that maybe, what is some of your concerns? What are your things that are making you either uncomfortable, fearful, aspirations, blessings? What is it that you may be looking for? And then actually doing the part and taking the walk, and then having them read the translation of the walk and sitting down and maybe discussing that a little bit. So what you find is that the walk oftentimes is surprisingly accurate, because you inherently know what is the right thing to do. You need the reinforcement from the Guru Sahib to kind of guide you in that process. So as and when they start seeing that be actionable, that they see that what their concerns were are being guided by the Guru Sahib's word, they will start believing in this, because ultimately it is about belief that the Guru will come through for you and will guide you. And it's not that there's going to be a prescription that comes from it. It's not prescriptive, but it is reinforcing what you already know is right with your moral compass. And once they realize the essence of this, they will unlock the mystery of how is it that the walk can actually guide me to the right ways. And once they start seeing that, it's a small bite-sized thing that can be done. It's reading a small walk after you do the Japji Sahib. They will end up memorizing Japji Sahib in this process, understanding the concept of Ardas, seeing the walk and translating the walk themselves, and being able to address some concern and bring peace to their mind. It takes all of 15 minutes to do, and you don't even need to do it every day. I mean, ideally you would, but if you can't, then doing it even once or twice a week becomes a way for them to start engaging with that hook. Once they start seeing that value, the peace come from it, understanding that they can start meditating a little and getting calm. So the value has to become clear to them. And once the value is clear, the pull will be generated.
I agree with you, Dr. Saab. What kids, I think our new generation, they want evidence. And so a lot of research is being done on mindfulness, and there's people doing MRI scans showing what happens to your brain when you meditate and what happens to your brain when you have this kind of thoughts. And we basically need to bring both of our Gurbani and the scientific research evidence and bring it together so we can show our youth that this is what the Guru is talking about. This will happen to you if you read Gurbani, understand Gurbani, put it in your heart, because the evidence is there. Science is now starting to prove what the Gurus have been saying for the past 500 years, that when you meditate, you reach a much higher stage. Your brain cells work much more in conjunction than when you're not doing it. So I think work needs to be done in that area, so where we can connect Gurbani with science. I think that will make a huge impact on our youth, and they'll grow love for Bani. And
so on behalf of SikhRI, I'd like to thank Dr. Harsohena Kaur, Dr. Amarjit Singh Soni, and Dr. Kuldip Singh Kailon for making time to connect with the Sikh world today. And thank you to you, our Sangat, for tuning in today and for spending this time with us. I particularly enjoyed being a background listener into this very rich conversation. It was lovely to be able to hear this conversation unfold, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it progresses. Please tune in for our next live webinar, 1984, The Devoted and the Worldly, where we will be joined by Harsohena Singh to answer questions such as, why was the Sri Harmandir Sahib and Akal Takht Sahib complex attacked? What is the Sikh historical context? How must the memory be kept alive 36 years on? Please tune into the SikhCast, a podcast produced by SikhRI, where we explore the various issues and events affecting Sikhs worldwide. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
You were listening to SikhCast by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.